How reliable is the tool we use to peek into our past? Is carbon-14 dating truly foolproof? Let's take a moment and ponder. Carbon-14 dating, our go-to method for determining the age of ancient artifacts, is it as infallible as we believe? It's a technique that measures the decay of carbon-14, a radioactive isotope, to estimate the time that has passed since death. But, is it always spot on? Here's a look at some instances where carbon-14 dating fell short. Rewind to 1988, a piece of cloth stirred up a storm. The cloth in question was none other than the Shroud of Turin, a linen cloth bearing the image of a man who appears to have suffered physical trauma in a manner consistent with crucifixion. The shroud was subjected to carbon-14 dating tests, and the results were astounding. The tests suggested that the shroud was not the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, as many had believed, but a medieval forgery, dating back to somewhere between the years 1260 and 1390. This revelation shocked the world, but it also raised questions. Other evidence, such as the peculiar properties of the image on the shroud and the presence of pollen grains native to the Jerusalem area, seemed to suggest a different story. Could the carbon-14 dating have been inaccurate? As the debate raged on, it became clear that this was not a simple case of science versus faith. The shroud controversy was just the beginning. Fast forward to 1991, a set of ancient texts puzzled the scientific community. These texts, known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, were a collection of Jewish writings that were discovered between 1947 and 1956 in 11 caves near the Dead Sea. The scrolls are of great historical and religious significance, as they include the earliest known surviving copies of the Hebrew Bible. When carbon-14 dating was applied to these scrolls, the results were nothing short of puzzling. The dates ranged widely, with some even contradicting established historical and archaeological evidence. For instance, a fragment from the book of Isaiah was dated to the 2nd century BC, which was at odds with the prevailing belief that the text was written much later. This discrepancy sparked a series of debates among scholars and scientists. Some argued that the dating method was flawed, while others suggested that the scrolls might have been written over a much longer period than previously thought. These debates highlighted the inherent limitations of carbon-14 dating, and the necessity for corroborating evidence to establish a reliable timeline. However, the dilemma of the Dead Sea Scrolls was not just about the accuracy of carbon-14 dating. It raised larger questions about the nature of historical knowledge, the reliability of scientific methods, and the complexity of interpreting the past. Yet, the Dead Sea Scrolls were not the only victims of carbon-14 dating's inaccuracies. In 1994, an ancient behemoth brought another dating debacle. The Yarkov mammoth, discovered in the Siberian tundra, was a magnificent specimen, but it brought with it a perplexing puzzle. When scientists proceeded with carbon-14 dating, they were expecting to find a consistent age for this prehistoric pachyderm. However, to their astonishment, different parts of the same mammoth gave them vastly different dates. The tusks suggested an age of around 20,000 years. Meanwhile, the bones were telling a different story, indicating an age of 40,000 years. This was a conundrum indeed. How could parts of the same animal, living and dying at the same time, yield such different results? Was it a case of contamination, or did it expose an inherent flaw in the carbon-14 dating method? The mammoth mystery further muddied the waters of carbon-14 dating. It reminded us that even the most trusted methods can sometimes lead us astray, especially when dealing with the enigmas of the ancient world. In 2001, the age-old wonders of Egypt brought new questions. The Great Pyramids of Giza, these vast stone marvels, have for centuries inspired awe and curiosity. But when carbon-14 dating techniques were applied, the results were startling. The estimates they offered conflicted sharply with the historical records that have long been accepted. The carbon-14 dating suggested a much younger age for the pyramids than the traditional dating methods. It indicated that these colossal structures were built closer to the birth of Christ than to the reign of the pharaohs. This was not merely a minor discrepancy. It was a significant divergence that challenged established historical timelines. Could it be that the pyramids are younger than we thought? Or is it possible that the carbon-14 dating method faltered in the face of these ancient enigmas? As with previous examples, the simplest explanation might be that our dating methods are not infallible. The pyramids posed yet another challenge for carbon-14 dating. The reliability of carbon-14 dating remains a contentious issue. This is particularly evident when we look back on the instances where it has failed. Let's take a trip down memory lane, shall we? We've seen the controversy surrounding the Shroud of Turin, where carbon-14 dating placed the linen cloth in the Middle Ages, contradicting claims of its existence during the time of Christ. The Dead Sea Scrolls presented another dilemma, with carbon-14 dating results conflicting with paleographic estimates, casting doubt on the accuracy of the method. And who could forget the mystery of the mammoth? The beast's carcass, supposedly over 40,000 years old, had a part of it dated to a mere 6,000 years using carbon-14, and let's not forget the puzzle of the pyramids. Despite their grandeur and historical significance, carbon-14 dating of the mortar used in their construction has yielded dates that are 1,000 years off. These instances highlight a glaring truth: carbon-14 dating, like any scientific method, is not foolproof. It's susceptible to errors and inaccuracies, and its results should be taken with a grain of salt. This brings us to a philosophical principle known as Occam's razor. This principle suggests that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. So, when we consider the numerous instances where carbon-14 dating has failed, coupled with the myriad of variables that can affect its accuracy, the simplest explanation may just be that the method can fail. It's not a denouncement of science, but rather a recognition of its limitations. After all, science is a human endeavor, prone to human error. It's an ongoing quest for knowledge that's always evolving, always improving. So the next time you hear about a carbon-14 dating result, remember, it's not infallible. After all, even science has its limits.